Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Thank you for all coming out to hear me and Professor Yan discuss the international situation today. It's a great honor to be up on the stage with my old friend, Professor Yan. As you've been told, this is the third time that we've engaged with each other to discuss our similar views and different views about how international politics works. What I'd like to do here is just lay out my basic theory of international politics, just tell you how I think the world works, and I'm sure that many of you know the essentials of my argument, and then talk some about international order. My basic view of international politics is that it's all about a competition for power. At its root, great powers care enormously about the balance of power. And the reason they care greatly about the balance of power is that it's the best way to survive in the international system. And you always want to keep in mind that survival has to be the principal goal of any state. Because if you don't survive, you can't pursue any other goals. This is one of the problems I have with international economics, or economics in general. Economics pays no attention to survival. Economics is mainly concerned with prosperity. Prosperity is nice, but the fact is you can't become prosperous if you don't survive. And economists don't pay attention to survival. Now, why is survival such a tricky matter in international politics? It's very simple. It's because, number one, there's no higher authority in the international system. There's no night watchman. There's no ultimate arbiter. To put it in Hobbes's terminology, there's no Leviathan. And in the international system, where you have all these states, some of those states are really powerful. You all know about the United States, and of course China as well now. So you have powerful states, and you can never be certain of the intentions of those states. And the reason that you can't be certain of the intentions of those states are that intentions are something you can't see. Capabilities you can measure. During the Cold War, I was in the Air Force. I was in Air Force intelligence, and we used to look at the Soviet threat. We could always determine what Soviet capabilities looked like, but intentions were very hard to discern. You couldn't get inside and see what was happening inside the brain of Nikita Khrushchev or Brezhnev or whoever was running the Soviet Union. The intentions are just very hard to discern. Now, if you don't think that's true, and you think it is relatively easy to figure out a state's intentions now, my trump card is to say, you certainly cannot figure out future intentions. You cannot tell me what the intentions of the United States will be in 10 years, 15 years, or what the intentions of China will be in 10 years or 15 years. So uncertainty about the intentions of powerful states is something that's going to concern you greatly if you're a state in the system. And again, if you get into trouble, if a powerful state has malign or evil intentions towards you and comes after you, and you look to a higher authority to rescue you, there's nobody there. You're lost. It's why we say in the realist world of international politics that it is a self-help world. As my mother used to say when I was a little boy, God helps those who help themselves. This is very important to understand. How do you survive in an anarchic system, in a system where there's no higher authority? And the answer is very simple. You want to be very powerful. You want to maximize your power. You want to be, in my lexicon, a hegemon. Because that's the best way to survive. You don't necessarily want to be a hegemon because you have naturally aggressive tendencies. You want to be a hegemon because in an anarchic system, a system where there's no higher authority, where there are powerful states, and where you cannot be certain of the intentions of those other states, it pays to be really powerful. It pays to be a hegemon. Now, to be a bit more specific about this, my argument is that you can only be a regional hegemon. You want to be a regional hegemon, number one. And number two, you want to make sure that no other state is a regional hegemon. The ideal situation is to be the only regional hegemon in the international system. And the United States of America is the only regional hegemon in the system. And the United States, unsurprisingly, and this is exactly what my theory predicts, the United States does not tolerate peer regional hegemons. In the 20th century, there were 4 countries that attempted to establish regional hegemony: Imperial Germany, Imperial Japan, Nazi Germany, and the Soviet Union. And the United States played a key role in preventing all 4 of those countries from achieving regional hegemony. Again, the United States does not tolerate regional hegemony. Moreover, you want to understand that the United States went to great lengths to establish regional hegemony. As I like to argue, the United States started out as 13 weak colonies strung out along the Atlantic Ocean. And over the course of the 19th century, we marched across North America and we created a really powerful state. And then we told the European great powers, this is the famous Monroe Doctrine, we told the European great powers, we're not powerful enough to throw you out of the hemisphere now, but we will eventually be powerful enough, and when we do reach that point, we're going to throw you out and you're not welcome back. Distant great powers are not allowed in the Western Hemisphere. That's verboten, as the Soviets found out during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So again, you see what the United States did. The United States worked hard from the beginning to establish regional hegemony, to make sure that it dominated the Western Hemisphere. That was in the 19th century. And then, as I told you, in the 20th century, we went to great lengths to make sure we did not have a peer regional hegemon. That's my basic theory. Now, how does this apply to the world today? Well, most of you were born in the unipolar moment. The unipolar moment basically ran from 1991 to 2017. And in the unipolar moment, this kind of logic didn't apply because there was only one great power on the planet. It was the United States. It was a regional hegemon. Some would argue it was a global hegemon, right? But it was incredibly powerful. China was weak during the unipolar moment, and there was no chance you were going to try to achieve regional hegemony. But what happened is China became economically powerful. China became an economic powerhouse. Good for China, not good for the United States. But China becomes an economic powerhouse, and it begins to translate that economic might into military might. And it begins to think about dominating Asia. And I want to make clear, if I were the National Security Advisor, I'd tell him, we want to dominate East Asia. We want to drive the Americans out beyond the first island chain. We want to drive the Americans out beyond the second island chain. And we want to make sure we dominate East Asia. We want to be the most powerful country in East Asia. We do not want to suffer another century of national humiliation. You all understand that this is what happens in international politics when you're weak. When you're weak, the more powerful great powers prey on you. Study NATO expansion if you have any doubt about that. Russia was weak in the 1990s, and it was weak in the first decade and a half of the 2000s. What did the United States do? We shoved NATO expansion down their throat in 1999. We shoved NATO expansion down their throat in 2004. And then after 2008, we tried to shove NATO expansion down their throat again. regarding Ukraine and regarding Georgia. That's how the United States operates. It was powerful, Russia was weak. That's what happens when you're weak. And the Chinese surely understand that. So you want to be powerful. Again, you want to be a regional hegemon. And you can see China heading in that direction. Most Chinese will deny this, of course, which is the smart thing to do, but the Americans are very suspicious. So, what is happening here in the world today? I'd say basically two things are happening. Number one, China is on its way to developing enough economic and military capability to think seriously about dominating Asia. And it should want to dominate Asia. It should want to imitate the United States. And oh, by the way, the Chinese are also developing power projection capability. They're developing a blue water navy, just like the United States. Do I blame the Chinese? Not one bit. But what do the Americans think about this? I told you, the Americans don't tolerate peer competitors. And you want to understand, this is basically a zero-sum game. The more powerful China gets, the weaker the United States gets. The more powerful the United States gets, the weaker China gets. So you're involved in this intense security competition. And as you all know, this security competition, underline that word security, is not simply a military competition, it's an economic competition as well. And that economic competition revolves around cutting-edge technologies. That's what explains what's going on in terms of U.S.-China economic relations. We, the United States, want to remain the #1 country in the world in terms of developing cutting-edge technologies. China, of course, wants to replace us. Again, I don't blame the Chinese one bit, but the Americans are going to go to great lengths to prevent that from happening. All of this is to say we are involved today in an intense security competition that shows no signs of going away. And if anything, will get worse with the passage of time. This is a tragic situation. It has nothing to do with Chinese culture or American culture. I know many people in China blame the United States for all this trouble, and many people in the United States blame China for all this trouble. That's not what's driving this train. You all remember that between 1991 and 2017, the Chinese and the Americans got along very well. And then something changed. What do you think changed? Was it ideology? Was it domestic politics? No, what changed was the balance of power. You became really powerful. And when a country becomes really powerful in the international system, you can rest assured that Uncle Sam is going to put its gun sights on that country. And that's exactly what's happening here. It's hardly surprising. So my argument is it's the system that has caused this intense security competition. And let's hope moving forward, when we have a crisis, and we will have crises, that we can avoid a shooting war. Let's hope that this one plays itself out similar to the Cold War, where although the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in an intense security competition, that security competition never turned into a hot war. Let's hope that's the case this time around. But it is going to be intense, is going to be dangerous. And I believe that the competition between the United States and the Soviet Union will define the 20th century. It will be the defining feature of the 21st century, not the 20th century, 21st century. Okay. Let me just say a few words about order, international order. And order for me is basically the bundle of institutions that dominate how states or dictate how states interact with each other. Institutions are basically rules, and an order is a group of institutions. During the Cold War, when I was young, there was an American-led Western order, and there was a Soviet-led communist order. And in that American-led Western order, what were the bundle of institutions? Well, it was the GATT at the time, which later became the WTO. GATT, IMF, World Bank, NATO, European Union. That was the Western order. Then, on the other side, the Soviets had their own order. Comintern, the Warsaw Pact, Comecon, so forth and so on. So there were these bundles of institutions that comprised these two, what I call bounded orders, not really an international order. And they were of enormous importance. Then what happens is the Cold War ends, the Soviet Union goes away, and its order goes away. And what the United States does, unsurprisingly, is take its order, take its institutions, and try to spread them all over the planet. And indeed, incorporate China into those institutions, into that order. And China actually goes along with it because it provides a way of helping China to grow economically at an incredibly fast pace. Think about the WTO. Coming into the WTO in 2001 was manna from heaven for the Chinese, right? You liked that order. But you know what happened? What happened is you became very powerful. And when you became very powerful, you meaning China, became very powerful, you wanted to upend the order. And it makes perfect sense. Orders are rules. Orders are institutions which are rules. Orders are rules. And the question is, who writes the rules? You know who wrote the rules in the existing international order that you were integrated into in the 90s and early 2000s? Uncle Sam wrote the rules. But when you became powerful, you wanted to write your own rules for your own institutions. AIIB, Belt and Road, I could go on and on. Chinese institutions will become part of a Chinese order, and there will be an American order, very similar to the Cold War. So the old international order that you were born into is either gone away, or going away. And what is happening now is a Chinese-led order is beginning to form, and a Western-led order is beginning to form. And these two orders will play a key role in the security competition between the United States and China, just as the existing orders, just as the existing bundle of institutions on each side played a key role in the waging of the security competition between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. Thank you.